Great.
There we go. Okay. Welcome everybody to this episode of Between Two Teachers, bringing you the news about education today and updates and what's the biggest issue, what the biggest issues are, and also giving advice, of course. Best practices. We know some best practices to share. So today is Friday, November the 5th, and my name is Consuelo Lara.
And I'm Madeline Cronenberg. And we'll begin as always with our land acknowledgement. We pause to acknowledge that we have gathered on the ancestral territory of Huichin, which is part of the unceded land of the Chochenyo and Karkan-speaking Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland, and offer our respect to their elders and all Ohlone people, past and present. And so here we are in November, after an election day, last Tuesday, that very much was impacted by education. And the big issues were the governor's race, where they used the masking as one issue, and critical race theory as another big issue in school board elections, as well as the governor's election throughout the country. It's become a major issue over and over, and it's just deliberately done by the Conservative Party, by the conservative wing of the Republican Party. Very carefully put together, and although I will say that there is truth that there are certainly families that have different opinions around masking and different opinions around vaccinations, and those opinions have been politicized.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. And the critical race theory, it just, to me, targets ethnic studies. And that's something that this country really needs. We need to know more information about each other, and teaching the true history of this.
That's it. That's all it is. It's targeting history teachers, and how you teach the history of what happened in our country. And our history is still being written. How we're doing this today is going to be part of the history people are going to learn in the future. And it's this incredible struggle of how we want to preserve a way of teaching history that we now absolutely know is unfair and untrue.
Exactly.
And that's really where we are. But we are there. So there are all sorts of issues and protests going on around it. Including one of the things that happened this week that was interesting, I spoke about this last week, is that there were school boards that were upset with the National School Board Association when they talked about the protests and had the Department of Justice respond to the violence and the level of violence in the protests. So now a group of state school board associations, the ones there were, I think 20 of them, that were upset that the decision that the National School Board Association had made the decision without checking in with them first. That's really what
they
wanted. They've resigned from the National School Board Association.
Oh.
And guess what they're going to do? They're going to start their own national advocacy organization that reflects their values.
Oh, that's it.
So we'll be able to follow that. That's coming. That's what they're working on. Absolutely. And so what that will do is, so it's not going to be, this is what's happening here is education's being split up. It's being fractured. It's not one voice, even on the school board level, even on the state school board level. Right. So now you can belong to a school board in a state, and the organization that, it's going to be very interesting what positions these different organizations are going to take, but we can see where they're going to be if this is where they are around, essentially around the vaccines and around or at least around the conflict that came up as a result of the various mandates that the school boards have been working on.
Right. Okay.
So that's out there. The other thing I did wanted to do for a shout out for California. California has basically started to give mandates. I think we've done more mandates for students than other states. And in right, so we have 350,000 children who've gotten their shots, but if they don't get them by a certain date, they're going to have to go into distance learning. And depending on which district you're in, that's not the state doesn't require that yet because it's added to the vaccine requirements starting in July. But for example, Oakland and Los Angeles, West Contra Costa, and Hayward and Piedmont. That's the group that has actually voted on it and have put in the rules that say basically by January.
Yes.
And sometimes by the middle of January. West Contra Costa is really saying by the end of the semester that ends in the middle of January. Yeah. That's it. If you're not vaccinated, you need to be not disenrolled. You need to just be enrolled in not in an in-person class.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oakland has said that you can be disenrolled.
Yeah, that's interesting to me, just to use that phrase, isn't it? You don't.
I've never seen that before.
No, me neither. You have to find a different way to get education for your child. You know, you find another environment or situation system, but disenroll. I mean, there's expulsion. There's, but this is. It's a public school. You can't disenroll people. This is.
I don't understand it. And you're right. There is expulsion, and then you would be sent to the county. But they're not using the word expulsion, and expulsion requires a set of behaviors here that are not what we're talking about not.
So no, yeah. So that was a wrong use of the word. So. They're going to have to change that. It's not going to work.
It's hard to believe that it would work. I mean, it just is. And actually, it's been discussed. But anyway, that's what
they are.
That's what they're doing. Then what am I going to do here? This was interesting. In the county where they had the biggest issues around the fights at the schools and the publicity around the vaccine mandate and masking, Loudoun County, and the critical race theory as well. They were upset. They got one of their members. Is no longer in. She was removed. Well, she resigned because of the threats that were being made against her, and they were threatening to recall her as well. But I think in the end, the thing that pushed her was the threats against her and her family. Yeah. So she resigned. But at the same time, that county had to close all their schools and put all their children into distance learning for a week. And the reason was teacher and staff shortages.
Yes, that's right.
They didn't have enough people to run their schools.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that. Not enough either subs or just staff. In general, the teacher shortage, they've had to close schools. And administrators, everybody's going into the classroom to take up the classes because there's not enough staff. So this issue of closures, low enrollment, or staff shortages, all kinds of things are happening to kind of squeezing these, forcing school closures for a number of reasons.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what they had to do then, so that means that teachers have to be prepared to go into distance learning. So what they did with these children were they closed the school, but they said it was supposed to be open. They had distance learning with their teachers or with somebody. Because you could, with distance learning, you could have more kids. And
the teacher.
Anyway, and that's in Virginia. So this is this is a national issue that I think we're going to hear over and over again this winter.
And, you know, in January, that seems to be the cutoff time. The schools are saying by January, vaccine, you know, or.
Well, they're saying they want you to take your second vaccine before you go on your 2-week break. So that gives us a regular break there for the 2-week Christmas, winter break. And then when you come back, what they're all hoping is that when people come back in January, when the weather is bad, you're not going to be outdoors, you're going to be at greater risk for catching something, everyone will be protected by the vaccination. That's sort of the thinking.
Yeah. And then on top of that, here in Contra Costa County, so they've got this vaccine now for kids ages 5 to 11. And there's a series of town halls. Our county office, Office of Education had one last night. Great information. And people, I think sometimes are just too cavalier about children getting COVID. Oh, well, they're younger, they can fight it off. And they're, you know, well, one of the pediatricians, they had 5 of them on this panel, talked about children who are losing their sense of smell and how really tragic that is. So so they don't get seriously ill, and but there are consequences.
But there's and there are the children who have gotten seriously ill, right? I mean, certainly the children who have any underlying conditions, there are children who have passed away.
Yes.
Because of COVID. So it's not like it hasn't happened. It's just certainly, it's not the same percentage as older folks in nursing homes. The percentages there are much higher, but it's not like it doesn't happen.
And that's why, you know, you hear this all the time. It's about information. You know, bad information, people are believing they can't get the right information. And so that's why I think these town halls, I don't know if we have, the town halls are really great. And I'm going to try to send that out as much as I can.
I will link it. So if you're watching this, I'm going to make sure that there's going to be a link in the resource page, but also where I describe the Between Two Teachers. As soon as we get the link, we don't have it yet.
No, not yet, but I'm sure probably today
we'll have it.
For sure. And we'll send it to all the electeds we know and everybody that we can, who can spread the word as well. The right information is what we need.
It's a critical thing. It's a critical thing because what is happening is, the other thing that's happening in across the state in particular, and any place that has these rules, is they are now, especially for staff, for some of them, the staff deadline has passed. Right, which is the staff deadline, because they're adults. They don't have this same deadline for the 12-year-olds, and ultimately the 5-year-olds will have. Their deadlines are passed, so they're being reassigned, or they're being let go.
Yeah,
right, and that's happening. I mean, the first place that actually happened, or one of the first places, is Los Angeles. So there are teachers there. If you have teachers who didn't want to get vaccinated, what they're doing is putting them in their distance learning program. Then you're going to be at home, right? So there's a story of a teacher who is a film production teacher, right? So he's a CTE teacher from Los Angeles. That's a big job. There are lots of jobs in this.
Sure.
So he's now a high school teacher in distance learning, which means he has to teach AP Bio and AP Chem.
Yep.
Well, he's not the best person to teach AP Bio or AP Chem.
Nope. Oh boy, all the repercussions.
So that's the kind of problem that's coming up right now as we struggle with this.
Yes.
Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about something we've a problem we've had for years in education. It happens over and over again for a lot of different reasons. And right now, one of the biggest reasons is COVID itself and the declining birth rate. And the fact declining birth rate means we have fewer children. And that leads you to smaller budgets and the need to close schools. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there have been a variety of ways to do this recently. Oceanside, California had a big issue around it. And they ultimately this week voted to delay their closing. So they did not close. Cupertino in Silicon Valley had an issue. They made a choice not to have quite as much public conversation around it. They had one meeting apparently, and then at the next board meeting, they voted to close 3 schools. They did it. They're closing them in Cupertino. Hayward has had a school boundary, what they called a school boundary committee. But it really was a school boundary and consolidation / closure committee. And they are now in the process of a conversation around closing 9 schools in the next 3 years. And their Mr. Superintendent Wayne, Matt Wayne, wants to do that on November 17th. He wants the vote to happen on November 17th so that his staff is able to plan ahead. But meanwhile, I had remembered that in West Contra Costa in 2008, we had a proposal from our superintendent to close 8 schools. And in the end, we closed 2. One of them only had 135 students. So you couldn't really keep that open because it was not supported by the neighborhood no longer had very many children. The other one that we closed, we turned into a middle school. So, and then another one, that building just came down. So there was a third one that was closed. It was not repurposed. The building was no longer safe. 2 of them, the buildings were no longer safe. The others, however, we kept open, including a high school that was on both List A and List B, Kennedy High School, and an elementary school that was on these lists, Lake Elementary in San Pablo. And the way that happened was the school board partnered with the city councils of the cities where the schools were located. And that's a partnership that I'm not seeing these other boards follow. And it's certainly at least worth a try. You know, maybe you can't develop the partnership, but I really suggest to everyone involved in any kind of closure to go and see if your schools and your cities have the same constituency, the same people vote for the city council members and the school board members. And the folks that get elected are there to serve their community. And there's no reason they can't work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Our school district here, we've got Hercules, San Pablo, El Cerrito, Pinole, and Richmond. These are 5 cities with their own city councils, and they could partner with our district. And the thing I remember getting on the school board, I think, man, our cities really love their schools. They will fight tooth and nail for their schools. And I think it was mostly around like Steege. I remember the passion people had, the history there. It's part of their heritage. It's, you know, they're passionate
but
about
you have to bring them in. Somebody
got to bring them together. Yes, that's true. That's the thing that's missing.
Right? People assume that they're somehow connected. And unless there's somebody who goes out and makes the connection, it doesn't happen.
It doesn't. No.
You can have a joint meeting. You could have board members or council members speak at each other's meetings. And that's happened over the years. Yeah. But then it doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen, then you get used to not going, and you don't have each other's backs, and you really are not serving your communities as well as you could.
Yeah, because the assumption is, oh, they know about it. They don't know what's going on in the school district. Trust me. I've had city council people going, what? They're going to do what? So yeah, it's about information, getting that information out to people, connecting people, creating those partnerships. And didn't you say that it was Mr. Thurman who brought that?
In the end, what we had, when I go back to that time, Mr. Thurman was on the school board, and there was a lot of the deal was the school board members wanted to keep the schools open. We were committed to wanting to do that, and just to think of every possible way to do it. And in the end, Mr. Thurman came up with an idea that we had never tried before, in my recollection, And that was to have a joint meeting with the school board and all 5 cities, all 5 city councils, and all 5 city managers, right? And our superintendent. Everybody was there. So they got, and it meant that people had a prep to go and get to know the issues. And the deal is when they're all in the room together, people are motivated to try to think of finding solutions
And it
and
worked.
owning the problem.
And it worked.
And it worked.
It worked.
So
let's do something we know works.
So Mr. Thurmond, who then went from being on the school board to being in the state assembly, and is now in Sacramento, and is the superintendent of public instruction, our state superintendent. That was Mr. Thurmond's idea.
Yeah.
And it's still a great idea. And I see him doing that now in all of the outreach and collaboration he's doing. Right? He's always understood that the political process is formed and made strong by collaboration and partnerships.
Yeah. And just a warning about school closures, when that disaster is looming, there are the privatizers circling the district, just waiting to swoop in and, let's start a charter school.
Exactly true. So at the Hayward meeting, I watched the Hayward meeting the other night, and at the conclusion of the conversation around the school closures that they had, and the many parents who spoke, and the tremendous pain that this whole conversation's brought up. They had a presentation by a group called the Primary School, and the Primary School is a school that's right now a preschool in Hayward that essentially hopes to become a K-8. That's their goal. And a pre-K-8, because they want to stay as a preschool. They have a model, and their model is a parent coaches by grade, so that every grade would sort of have a coach social worker assigned to it. So that would be a type of staffing that we don't have in any public school that I know of. So that's an unusual idea, and it certainly supports parents. And they also, their other model was to have a full day kinder, a full day preschool, and have a connection to Kaiser. And so there would be folks there from the medical community. So you would get your medical services, families would get their medical services at the school. And as you say, they are hopeful to form a partnership with the school district and have their board and the school district board somehow work together to run this school, which is a very complicated issue, because one of the things that they would like to be able to have their board have the power to do is hire teachers and principals. And that's not, that would require the teachers, the labor groups to agree.
Yeah. That's where labor come in. And,
yeah. And it's not real likely that will happen.
No.
But if it doesn't happen, what they said was that they would then go forward and be a charter school.
Yep, they're going to try it for sure.
So we can watch that. That's what's going on in Hayward.
Okay.
What were the other things? And then here's the other update. In Loudoun, I mentioned this, Miss Bartz has left. The other interesting piece of update news is around Lowell High School, which we did talk about here a little bit in the past. And that is now they're supposed to move forward on a lottery system, but the alumni from Lowell High School have sued, and the alumni want to restore the merit-based system, which is not straight up merit-based. It's very, very complicated. I looked at the lawsuit, and it's a complicated lawsuit. So it's not done. We'll have to wait and see what the result is from them, how Lowell High School is going to admit students next year. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're up to our shout outs. So the first shout out I have, we have one for an individual, the others are for 2 institutions. So the first group is the Richmond City Council. is the Richmond City Council adopted a resolution supporting older adults and adult education. And the fact that that is a group that is very dismissed. They are not really given the respect that they certainly deserve. And Richmond City Council voted to speak or support it in front of the West Contra Costa School Board, and also to the state for additional funding and a regular funding line for adult ed from the state. So a shout out to Richmond, and a shout out to Chicago. Chicago Public Schools have declared a holiday next week, November 12th. And it's going to be called Vaccination Awareness Day. And what they're doing as of today, or I guess yesterday, the vaccine for 5-year-olds to 12-year-olds has become available. And they're going to close their schools and have students come to school to get vaccinated that day.
Great.
That is a major effort. So I'm waiting to see what other cities and districts throughout the country follow them, right?
And that's the kind of thing that we need to do also, like in Oakland. My shout out was to Mike Hutchison in Oakland on the school board, just for so many things he's doing. He was on Fox News where he was the one vote against mandating the vaccines. When you look at who are the children you're talking about who will be the most affected, and then
who you're disenrolling.
And so he was not for that. He wants, like we're talking, education, more accessibility. I bet he'd love that day off so they could get vaccinated. So so my shout out is to him. He's also rewritten their charter policy, and being on our charter committee, that's something that is something important to me. So he's just plowing through all of these things, and shout out to him. He's great.
Absolutely. He is taking huge leadership, and he's shown that I saw a post he had on Facebook where he talked about how he had done in his 1 year in office much more than he had even expected he could do. And he really has. He
was a guest of ours sometime back.
He was.
Yeah.
This is why. I mean, and he has proven to be just a real warrior for kids in Oakland. So biggest shout out goes to Mike.
Okay.
And that's for this week. We'll see.
Yes, that's enough, I think.
It's plenty. It's plenty. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching us all the way through. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Between Two Teachers.
Thank you so much. Bye.